So this is going to be a very interesting ranking video because all 5 of these movies are very close to me in quality. Like, the differences are not that major. We're talking thin differences for most of them, except for maybe 1 or 2 spots. So yeah, pretty much I like all these movies. There's not a single movie on this list I don't like, but why not go through my least favorite to my favorite? But even my least favorite, like I said, is really good. This is my ranking of all 5 Scream films after, of course, seeing Scream 2022. This will include spoilers for the recent Scream movie and all of the previous Scream movies. So if you haven't seen them and you'd like to see them and you don't want to see me spoil things, don't watch this video until you actually watch those movies. So let's start this ranking. In the number 5 spots, Scream 3, which released in the year 2000. I think this is most people's last place. I don't think many people will have any other movie in last place. Probably, it's okay if you have a different opinion, don't get me wrong, but I think most people are probably going to say this one's the worst for a few reasons. I like a lot of things about this movie, though, don't get me wrong. First of all, I love the new location in Hollywood. I think that was a cool new setting because you can't have the same film and, the same franchise in the same setting all the time. So I like to get some new scenery, and the Hollywood feel was kind of nice, kind of fitting, and it kind of worked because this movie was all about the production of these stab movies, which have been in a couple of previous ones, but this one was really like hitting that hard with the whole idea of the stab movies that were trying to replicate the actual events, which brings a lot of problems in Sydney's life because she's like, why are people making movies based off of my tragedies and what she's been through. So I find that to be very interesting, and she has a lot of trauma in this movie, and rightfully so because of what she went through in the past 2 films. So I liked how they played with that, how they kind of showcased that a lot throughout the movie. Sydney, Dewey, and Gale were still very great in this film. There wasn't any like weird things they did with them. A lot of the times in franchises like that go on for a while, you start to get some characters that you used to love in the originals and they start to do some really stupid things, or the writing is just not good for them. They don't give them proper development. But I feel like the development here was actually pretty good. The way it developed Dewey and Gale's relationship, the way it developed Sydney as a character with what I was just saying with the whole trauma, it was very well executed. Then we get into some of the negatives though. They were probably the weakest side characters we've ever had. You had Jennifer, Angelina, the Mark Kincaid guy, who I believe was the cop or detective, whatever you want to call him. I just wasn't a fan of a lot of these side characters. I didn't latch onto them the same way I do for pretty much all the other Scream movies. But some of them were somewhat fun to watch, I guess. And the killer reveal of Roman was not my least favorite reveal, I don't think, but it definitely had a lot of just reaching story implementations with the connection to Sydney's mom. I feel like it was just a bit much having Roman be her brother. It was just like, it felt like it was thrown in there, very kind of forced in there almost, just for the sake of a shock situation, just for the sake of us being like, holy shit, that's insane, when it didn't feel like it was that necessary. I guess you probably could have came up with something else that would have still been very interesting, but wouldn't have made the audience go, that's really where you're reaching for now for these reveals, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I felt with this reveal. And the voice changer was probably my least favorite thing about the movie, because the whole time I'm sitting there like, what the hell is that? Like, this is not a futuristic society with crazy devices that can do stuff like that. Like, maybe if it came out today, I would somewhat believe it, but in 2000, there's no way. There was no voice changer. Even now, we don't have stuff like that. We have things you can do on computers like that, but you can't just carry along a little device that just automatically changes your voice on the spot like that and just re-emits it through the same device. That's not like, and you can perfectly do their voice. It's not like it's a little bit off. No, it was perfectly imitating anyone's voice. That was just unnecessary. Actually, one more positive I could think of, that Randy callback with the whole scene where they were watching Randy's like tips of how to survive these situations. I really like that. That was a nice little touch to the movie. But movie itself, I still really enjoyed it. It was still really good. It just definitely was my least favorite of all of the Scream movies. Come number 4 spot, Scream 2, which released in 1997, actually just 1 year after the original. This one was a really solid sequel. Like, we're already getting to movies that I think are really good. Like, everyone from here on out is a really good movie, at least an 8 out of 10 to me. Scream 2 was a really solid sequel. I like the new setting in the college atmosphere. It made sense. You know, you go from the first one being in high school, and then the next one, she's in college. It fit. And I like how Sydney's not like crazily on edge like she is in Scream 3, but she's definitely like, you know, a little on edge here and there with some situations based on what happened in the first one. But it plays out very, very well. I like that her boyfriend was not the killer in this one. That would be very repetitive if her boyfriend was the killer again. So I'm glad they gave the killer, you know, the ghost face reveal to some other characters. And I actually liked the reveal in this one a lot. It was, of course, of Debbie Salt and Mickey. Mickey was a character that was obviously just very crazy. I mean, all the ghost, you know, face killers are to a degree. But I mean, his main motivation was kind of centered around that type of thing. But Debbie Salt's character, in her just kind of being thrown in there, I actually really liked that reveal because she wasn't like a very important character to the story to the point where we felt like we would be suspecting her that much. But when I watched it, I always thought it was her just because they made her kind of have these scenes with Gail every now and then. I'm always thinking to myself, there's got to be some purpose to this character other than just her talking to Gail every now and then. Like, there's no way she's just some random character that we just have random scenes with for no reason. So maybe it was a little predictable because of that, but I still really like that reveal and how it all plays out in the end. And the side characters were pretty good. You had Sarah Michelle Gellar in this movie, which we all know she's amazing, and she wasn't a main character or anything, but her little appearance in there was a lot of fun. Of course, the other characters, you have Marine, you have Cotton Weary in this one. He's in a bunch of this one. He was pretty good in it. You kind of have some suspicions of him at some points, but at the end, it's not him. And of course, the returning 3 characters we all know and love are fantastic. Oh, forgot about Randy. 4 characters in this one. And Randy has a pretty good death scene as well. I thought it was fitting for his character, even though it was definitely very upsetting because he is one of the better characters from this franchise. So Scream 2, I would say, is a solid step up from the first one, and I honestly don't have really any negatives for it. Like, I can't physically think of a negative for a lot of these films, and I can't physically think of a negative for Scream 2. It doesn't do everything that well, so just because it has no negatives doesn't mean it has to be a 10 out of 10 movie, because what the things it does well, I don't think are the best things ever, the best things I've ever seen. But just from a technical standpoint, I think this is a solid horror sequel. It does its job pretty damn effectively. Now, I'll be honest, there's a very thin difference between these next two. These next two are like neck and neck. Like, if I were to rank every horror movie I've ever seen, these two would be probably right next to each other. Number 3 is going to be Scream 2022, the brand new Scream movie, Scream 5, whatever you want to call it. I love this movie so much. Go watch my reviews if you want to hear my full thoughts. I gave it an 8.7 out of 10 rating. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but what holds it back from being better than the top 2 is the killer reveal. I did not like the reveal and the motivation behind the characters. It felt like it's something we've seen many times before in the Scream franchise, and I just was not on board with it. I was not attached to this. I was not like, wow, that's a crazy reveal like the first 4 were. I was surprised. I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. But I wasn't like in awe by the motivation, what's happening here. It just felt like they were just trying to do it for the meta commentary, which is fine for me, one of the characters, but the other one at least should have had a better involvement in it. I just did not really care for, spoiler again, I'm sure you probably clicked off, I already said spoilers, but for Amber and Richie as the killers, I did not care for it, unfortunately. I didn't think it was the worst thing they could have possibly have done. It didn't ruin the movie for me, but it held it back from being as good as it possibly could have. But the movie itself, after not having a Scream movie for so long, did a good job of kind of introducing us back to the Scream franchise in a way where it felt like it was passing the torch to a new generation of Scream possibly characters. I'm not sure if they're going to do a sequel with the exact same characters, but I wouldn't mind it because the characters that did survive in the end, some of them I like a lot. I liked Sam as a character. I've seen a lot of people online already saying that the actress for Sam was not very good. I personally didn't feel like I had an issue with her acting. There was a couple scenes maybe that were a little iffy, but nothing to a major extreme. For the most part, I thought she was fine. I liked her as a character in terms of the writing for her, what they were doing with her and her connections to Billy Loomis, obviously being Billy Loomis's daughter. I was completely fine with that. And of course, you have Tara, played by Jenna Ortega, and she was probably one of the better parts of the movie. very surprising that she was a big part of the movie because I thought they were going to kill her off in the first scene, but they didn't, so I was very shocked by that. And it seemed like it was passing the torch because the legacy characters were not all that involved in it, and the ones, some of them that were, died in it, of course. Dewey, and I thought his death scene mostly was handled well. There's a couple things about it I didn't love, like I said, the lead up to it, and the fact that she never got to say anything to Sydney. I don't know, I feel like we could have had one scene with them that would have been nice, but what they did with Sydney and Gale in the end, although they didn't do a lot with them in this movie, I thought it made sense because it's not their movie. You know what I mean? This is supposed to be a new Scream sort of requel, like they keep saying it's a requel, so it's supposed to be someone else's movie. It's not all about Sydney anymore, which I'm fine with. That's a good way to introduce us to a new generation of Scream. But is Sam going to be the best possible lead for that? I would be fine with that, but I'm not sure if the community would right now because people seem to not like her that much. I was fine with it though. And also, as I said in my other reviews, a couple weirdly shot scenes that just could have been executed better. I feel like I have this issue with some of the Scream movies all the time, like a couple of things where I'm like, that could have been done better. You could have definitely filmed this in another way. I think I did say I had no issues with Scream 2 when I was talking about it, but there was one scene in Scream 2 that really bugged me with that whole situation. It's like, oh, you could have just knocked the killer out. Why didn't you just punch him in the face a million times or something while he was down, but instead you just run away? It's a couple of times that happened in Scream 2, but I didn't mention that because I kind of forgot that was a big problem, because it really wasn't a big problem, to be honest. A lot of these things are nitpicks. These movies are really solid for the most part. These are just nitpicks that kind of just hold it back a little bit from being as good as it possibly could. But this one, like I said, the reveal of the killers was definitely the worst part about it. That definitely held it back. But I love the kills in this movie. Some of the best kills in the Scream franchise. Had a lot of gruesome kills, a lot of gruesome moments. And overall, I enjoyed it. I had a fun time. That comes in at number 3 spot. Number 2 is going to be Scream 4. So I'm sure a lot of you saw this coming for this order. I feel like this order is a very popular order to rank these movies in. I'm not sure where people are going to rank the newer one, but when it comes to the first 4, I feel like this is a pretty popular order to do them in. And yeah, Scream 4 is fantastic. This was a solid Scream movie, which is surprising because it's like it comes so later after the original, and very much later even after the third film. It was 11 years after the third one, and then this next one was another 11 years, which is kind of interesting how they took 2 11-year breaks between both of those films. But this has got to be one of the best killer reveals in the franchise. It was not the best, but it's one of my favorites. I know a lot of people think it's a bit much with, Jill, but I love it. I'm sorry, I do. You have Jill and Charlie. Charlie was just kind of there as an accomplice, and I like how Jill even ends up killing him, and that was a twist in its own right. But Jill was just so, it was the actress's portrayal of her that made her so interesting as a character, and the way it all played out, especially the scene where she's trying to make the scene look realistic. She started running into walls and stuff, running herself through tables, just knocking herself into everything, just making herself all wounded. Really shows the insanity from this character. And of course it was at the whole time Sydney's cousin, and I thought it played out perfectly. And then the scene in the hospital gets even crazier, where she's like, wait, Sydney's still alive, and she goes try to kill Sydney, and then that backfires, and then they kill her with the defibrillators. I don't know, I forget the name of them, but you know what I mean. That was so incredible, and solid cast in this one too. Definitely the second best cast of characters we've seen. You have, of course, legacy characters returning. You have Kirby, which Kirby is awesome. We all know Kirby's like the new Randy, essentially. You have Judy Hicks. You have Robbie. A couple other characters that I just find to be good introductions to the Scream franchise. And honestly, it felt like for a while there in Scream 4 that they were setting it up for more sequels because it was a new cast of characters and all. But then when they revealed that the main character, the new, this is like the Samantha character from the new one, practically, the new character that we're supposed to, enjoy watching and stuff, and we're supposed to root for, turns out to be the killer. That to me was so brilliant in every single way. And her motivation was just weird and psychotic, and it was like, I kind of fucking love this. So Scream 4 just did it all, man. It really did it all. Solid cast of characters, a solid follow-up. The kills were good. It looked good. It was definitely a well-developed movie on a technical standpoint. The shots were great. They had a lot of cool kills. This is one that's, I think, gets a lot of praise, and rightfully so. But, of course, the best Scream film is really hard to beat this one because of how classic and original it is. Scream from 1996, the first Scream movie, is the best Scream in my opinion. It's gonna be hard to beat it. I had a weird feeling that this new one would beat it for some reason, but then I thought to myself, that's so difficult to do because of how perfectly done it is. I don't have a single negative for this movie. I really can't think of one off the top of my head. There might be something I could nitpick, but no, it pretty much does everything perfectly. Definitely the best cast of characters. We have Sidney, Gale, Dewey all being introduced, and you have, Randy, you have Billy, Stu, Tatum. Yes, I know it's Tatum. Don't give me shit for it. Great cast of characters. The kill reveal was so interesting because we didn't know at the time watching the film that there was, well, obviously I watched it recently, but even people back then, we didn't know there was going to be two killers. No one really knows going into it unless you hear spoilers. So you don't think there's going to be two. You're assuming there's going to be one. After that one, we assume, okay, there might be two. But we did not think that for the first one. Most people didn't, at least. I never thought for a second there would be two killers in that first film. And so the whole time you're thinking, okay, it makes sense to be Billy, but it's impossible to be Billy because there's certain situations where he could physically have not have been in two locations at once, but then they reveal it's two in the end. It's like, oh shit, it's awesome the way it's all revealed, and very iconic scenes, and when he reveals himself, he's like, we all go a little mad sometimes, calling back to Psycho. They call back to a lot of horror films in this whole franchise, but this one does it very well in all instances. And then Stu is the other accomplice, and they both have different motivations for it, and I absolutely love how they both have different motivations for it, and all calls back to a lot of things that go on with their parents, and it all makes sense, and it all plays out so well. Sidney, of course, gets the upper hand, Gale and Dewey help, and it just all plays out so perfectly within this film. I really don't have any issues with it. The meta commentary on horror at the time kind of covers all the horror cliches and stuff, and the way they talk about that is brilliant because it's funny because these characters do these cliches in the movie, and it's like this horror cliches, but these characters literally do those cliches themselves, which is kind of part of the whole point of Scream, which is why I think it's such a successful franchise, because it's very relatable to the audience, because these characters in these movies, a lot of them are talking about horror movies the whole time, and guess what, we are horror fans, so that's just what happens. It's brilliant the way they did it. Wes Craven created an incredible franchise. Well, I don't know if he necessarily created it. You guys let me know exactly the fundamentals behind that. I know Kevin Williamson wrote the movies, but Wes Craven directed them, but I don't know who came up with the original idea. I'm not sure about that, but regardless, all the people involved in the creation of these films, they deserve everything because they did a great job, and I do think the new writers and directors of the new film did a great job following up the prior writers and directors of the other four films. So yeah, Wes Craven would be proud of that new one. Wes Craven would be proud that this franchise is still going in 2022, and I assume it's going to keep going from here on out. Hopefully we get some really interesting sequels going forward. Hopefully we get something very different. I want to see this would be crazy, but I want to see a sort of Scream movie in a completely different, environment. We always see it with the school environment. It's always the school characters and such, people that's still in school. I want to see them well, I guess Scream 3 wasn't that, but I want to see them go on a cruise ship or something like that. That's just very different than the typical setting we usually get in these films, which works completely fine because, it makes sense with, the killer slowly killing his victims, and then us, them finding bodies, and then the cops getting involved, and so it makes sense. But I kind of want to see in a very different atmosphere where, you can't even get cops because there's just they're in a situation where you can't get people to investigate, and it's going by fast, and people are dying quick. I don't know. I think that could work. So I just want to see this franchise continue, and the only way I think it can do that is if it does some very different things going forward. But I do think with what they did with this newest one, it worked, and it made sense for it to be very similar to the original. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your rankings in the comment section below. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave a like or a dislike, whatever you please. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys on my next one. Peace out.